serious, the kids each individually are serious projects, right, that require a ton of investment, that, you know, it's really a struggle to get them to meet our graduation requirements. And because we have many other kids who are, you know, functioning at a decent or high level, we can invest a ton in a small number of kids. And so we do that. We don't have to invest, you know, there are a lot of kids who are there who are ready. So I feel good about 90 to 95%. 100% would feel better. I think it's what it should be.
Yeah, how are you guys? Thank you for coming. I want to start off by saying I've never been to a Puente High School before, but I did go to EBC Bushwick High School, and I interned at the El Puente Center in Bushwick. Then from there, I was blessed to be able to work with so many good artists and great facilitators that I moved on to Teatro El Puente. And then I was working directly with administrators and teachers in El Puente High School, and I just have to say it was really interesting to work with you guys. If there was anything I could take away from that experience, it was the fact that assertiveness is I forgot what he said, but anyway, my assertiveness now is just really amazing due to that, right? But anyway, my question is, for me, I think teacher chemistry is the most essential aspect of teaching. That really motivates us to want to come in and just work with each other and just break down these really big problems and all that. My question is, what are some strategies that you guys do, if any, to promote team building within the staff?
So I have a staff of about 35 facilitators is what we call ourselves, not all of them are instructional teachers. It's one of those things where you have to be intentional and deliberate in creating not only opportunities to provide professional development, but opportunities for staff to get to know one another. Some of the activities are fun team building activities where you're building something out of toothpicks and toothpaste. Some of the activities are more complicated, and so we engage in the CRE work where we discuss issues of race and class and gender, and that allows us to then go a little bit deeper with one another. Fortunately, most of my staff has been there for over 10 years, so we do have a good sense of knowing one another. I say chemistry is tricky, but building healthy working relationships feels safer for me than chemistry. That said, you have to create those opportunities. It's not only about the teaching and learning, the curriculum planning and design. If as a staff and a community we cannot come together and hold ourselves accountable and to learn from one another, then we're not going to be able to model that for young people. And our expectation is that you're working in groups and collaborating. My firm belief is, and always has been, that no one of us is smarter than all of us. And so creating intentional opportunities for us to collaborate, learn, break bread, and build with one another.
Can I respond?
Sure.
I think that, so for me, it's very, well, I agree with you, and I think it's extremely important, and it is a hallmark of the school that I work in, that the teachers treat one another like siblings, and siblings that get along most of the time, that care for each other. So we do a couple of things to support that. Number one, at the beginning of every year, so we do 4 days of professional development before the school year starts, and we open the school year with what we call opening project. And so that's, many of you are probably familiar with this type of thing, but it's a school-wide project. This year we looked at health, we looked at the mind-body relationships and the physical mind-body relationships and something else. And we design curriculum together, and then we teach it, and we engage in designing a big, powerful thing that affects the whole school as a team, right? And so doing that thing, that act of creating together, I think is very powerful. I, myself, and the other administrator stay out of it. We just kind of coach, and if we notice that something needs to happen, we'll nudge. And each year, some new group or team of teachers takes responsibility for it. So it's like a very powerful way for the teachers and to say, like, we're together, we're doing this thing, we're pushing each other, learning from each other, you know, and then, you know, there's usually so much time pressure that people will either freak out and run away, or they'll turn to each other and say, like, wow, like, this is exhilarating, we are totally screwed, let's get it together, right? And my job is to make sure that they do the second one, and they turn to each other and are excited. And then in our professional development meetings, a teacher started this process. So we've done a couple of things this year. Three of our teachers went to a restorative practices training and over the summer, and we've started to do circle at our staff meetings. Our staff meetings were, you know, we always have gotten along in this way, but this new thing really enhanced our kind of connectedness. So, and every time we meet together, we're sitting in a circle facing each other. It's nice, you know, it eliminates the ability to be like, go like this at a meeting, right? So that's nice. And then we do a thing every staff meeting called Warm and Fuzzies. And at the end, we do issues and shout-outs. So at the beginning, the first 10 minutes, Warm and Fuzzies is like, what cool thing happened to you since the last time we got together? So we share really positive things, which is nice. Instead of like, oh, the photocopiers don't work, oh, it was crazy, oh, we're running out of this sucks. It's like a positive spin on anything. And I thought it was a stupid idea. I didn't say officially stupid, but just the act of saying something nice is actually really nice. I learned from that one. And then the issues and shout-outs, again, taking another 10 minutes at the end, it's like, you know, who's got the computer card, who's got the thing, hey guys, remember to like pick up your things and don't screw up and blah, blah, blah. And by the way, hey, I want to shout out Danielle, I saw you doing this amazing thing with kids. Or, hey, Justin, like you coached the flag football team and they won their championship and that was amazing. Some kind of thing where we shout each other out. And so it just builds this like mutual affection and desire to do good things. Or at the very least, it highlights it. So all the other stuff, the really powerful challenge and the freedom to do it, that's the core of it. And then add this like icing where you recognize each other. Just kind of helps to like regenerate the goodwill. And I think that's very important. And you can't measure that.
Yeah, we do very similar things. One of the more powerful things that all of our meetings, we sit in circles so that there's a clear relationship to everyone. There isn't a hierarchy. And in all of our meetings, to start with, we have a cabinet structure that's made up of both teachers and administrators where I'm not in charge. We have a rotating facilitator every week who really sets the agenda, and it gives teachers a sense of ownership in what's happening in the building because they do have total ownership about what goes on in the building. Within that cabinet, there's a culture committee that is specifically responsible for coming up with the great ideas around shout-outs and setting out birthday announcements, and just every meeting we come to, we always have sweets and, lollipops and just things so that folks feel as though their work is appreciated, that the time we spend together is human, because it's extremely hard work. We also have regular happy hours. There are union meetings that I'm invited to that are, always fun. And that's where, we can have different kinds of conversations around the work, conversations that we do not have in the building. And so it's important to understand that there's kind of different kinds of blowing off steam and different mechanisms for that to happen.
This gentleman's been ready, yes.
Good evening. I'm a special education teacher in the 6 to 12 school here in Harlem. In addition to supporting our students through graduation, one of our mandates is to make sure that when they leave us, they're knowledgeable citizens. So in addition to student government or community service, how do you support your students so that they know how, for instance, the structure of local government, or they know what the services involved in are? How do you support them so they know how to exercise their citizenship.
I'm gonna just admit out of the gate here, I don't think we do a very good job of that. I would say that's one area that we don't develop a lot of, we haven't developed good programming, and it's kind of, it's random in that some teachers of the 11th grade history have historically really wanted their kids to be engaged civically. Every 10th grade student does a project in which they identify a social justice issue, they go to a neighborhood in New York and look at how that issue affects the citizens, the residents, and then they design proposals kind of similar to what you were talking about. But it's a one-off, and then we have a trip to Washington, and there's a lot of engagement, but it is not an embedded part of the curriculum. So I don't think we're doing a very good job. Other than in that 10th grade year, we don't do an awful lot.
Yeah, I would say something pretty similar. I mean, we have teachers that are specifically have very specific interest in social justice issues. Remarkably, though, our kids are steeped in being conscious around social justice. So a lot of just their statements as artists forces the conversation with the adults in the building. So stop and frisk is huge. You know, what's going on with young black males right now, young black and Hispanic males, that's huge. And so this helps push the teachers, and a lot of the professional development that we provide is to make sure that the teachers are keeping their ears open to hearing what the kids have to say around these things. But in terms of engaging them directly with local government, I mean, we have people come in and see performances and stuff. It's not as specific as you kind of articulate.
I'm going to think it's different at El Puente.
Yeah, it's a bit different. I think the luxury of being a part of the consortium is that in terms of our history curriculum, there's a lot of liberty in what we teach and how we design our curriculum and our assessments. And so 10th graders, I'll use this as an example, engage in these human rights trials. And that's age 4, I believe. And what they do is that they're then taking Christopher Columbus to court and putting him on trial for genocide. And they have different imitative dances. And so we decide what we're teaching them in terms of the histories that they were taught and what they're unlearning. In 11th and 12th grade, which comes into the systems of, the 3 branches of government and legislation, they're not only understanding the role and the function of those, but they're also understanding the ways in which laws and legislation are allowing for certain conditions to exist and thrive within the communities that they live in. They are then, as part of their presentation, they have to make recommendations to change the legislation. That also provides evidence that they understand how these systems work, because we can't just dismantle the issue and the problem without understanding how this came to be. And so we have a history of our young Black and Latino males outperforming other Black and Latino males within similar schools, and part of that is that we are intentionally providing them with mentorship and leadership development and an ability for them to understand that stop and frisk is an issue that's plaguing my community because it was an issue that was intentionally created for us to make sure, and I'm being recorded, but I'm going to go ahead and say this, my role, I take it very seriously in terms of interrupting the systems in place. And I want to interrupt the school-to-prison pipeline. And we don't shy away from it. We move in that way. And we also want to make sure that students are kind to one another, they're empathetic, and they're compassionate. I think being highly cerebral and not understanding the ways in which our intellectual work will impact society at large is a disservice to society at large.
Other questions that are out there? We have
My question is for Mr. Thompson. I wanted to go back to what you were saying about how you handle grievance. I'm not the only one who probably views standardized testing system as more of a hindrance to education than something that accelerates it. And from what you were saying, it sounds like you encourage students to sort of become autodidactic and become teachers who are self-taught. And I found that really interesting, and especially with the way technology detail about how you handle the students passing the Regents.
Right, so I mean, I think it starts with first, just me being very vocal about, I hate Regents. I don't think they have any real value. And so, you know, I start off by letting students know that this instrument does not, it is not an expression of your value, period. So that they know exactly where I stand on it. And hopefully it gives them a different context for how to think about it. And then we just very methodically, over time, attack the tests. Not in a way where we cram test prep. That's not my point. What we really try to do is, again, build students' analytical skills so that they can begin to ask questions around, you know, what are the particular tasks asking them to do, and these are skills that are transferable, we believe, in the life that they will lead when they leave us around navigating the dominant culture. And so I think that's really the point about how we do it. And I can get into the details of, you know, sort of how we deal with mock tests, how students are part of understanding and analyzing and grading the answers that they give, how we break down, you know, before they did the shift into the Common Core, you know, we were able to go online and pull out 7 years of examples so that you could really understand, like, oh, wait a minute, this is just a pattern of things that they do, so that you can, again, this is not about test prep, this is about teaching students how to analyze and see behind the curtain of the things that are, or the roadblocks that are put in front of them. And so that's kind of how we deal with that. And all of the materials in the package, you know, students, we try to really emphasize their ownership and responsibility for doing it. Because, you know, it's not the teachers who are going to be responsible or I who are going to be responsible for it, but we really want the students to understand that the impetus for doing this work, for developing these analytical skills, really skills they already have. And then they know how to fully function within their cultural literacies. It's really transferring these skills into the dominant cultural literacies.
Question with that.
Kind of along the same lines. As far as the portfolio-based assessments go and Regents and so on and so forth, they sound to me fantastic and they sound like ultimate differentiation for students. What does data say when attracting students into college? Do they maintain it for 4 years, or do you have the grades compared to students taking more traditional assessments?
They far outperform them. So there's been one longitudinal study conducted by Martha Foote, which looked at the consortium schools, and consortium schools outperformed the citywide averages in four-year graduation from high school, enrollment in four-year colleges, completion of college in between 4 years, 5 years, and 6 years.
It's hard to imagine, but there was a commissioner in New York State who came here from Vermont. He was in New Jersey, and then he was commissioner in Vermont. His name is Rick Mills, and portfolio was his thing. He came to New York just at the time that everything was sort of shutting down with No Child Left Behind. And all of a sudden, you had to be in a whole different space. And so what he had really been hired for kind of evaporated very quickly. And the Performance Coalition fought very hard, got some exceptions to be able to maintain the work they were doing. But the vision was once that all of New York State would look like this. And then the federal world changed things much quicker than we thought in like 2000. Did you want to say something? Did I step on what you were saying?
No.
No? Yes.
I have a question about, maybe this is more for Lindsay, but in that situation where you're teaching students to be kind to one another, what remedies or practices does the community have when a student acts against the interest of the classroom's environment or the
I think think for us, for many years, we have what's called a HIP team, and it's our Holistic Individualized Process Team. That team is comprised of guidance counselor, social worker, community liaison, parent and family coordinators, and that team leads the work of social and emotional development. We have about 1% student suspension rate, and what we do is when students violate the norms of the community, they're given a separation, reflection, and reparation period. And so for 2 hours, they're pulled out of the community. They spend time with a HIP member that engages them in a guided reflection so that they begin to understand how their actions impacted not only their learning, but interrupted the learning of their community members. I guess a quick example that I can use that perhaps at another school would have led to an immediate suspension. I have 3, 4, 10th grade boys just sports playing in the gym, and they knock over a podium and it breaks. It's a wood podium. I could have suspended them for damaging school property, for vandalism, A, B, and C, and instead, these were really nice young men who were just fooling around. What we did was that they understood how they had damaged property that belonged to the community and would be needed for graduation ceremonies. They stayed after school a couple of days and they rebuilt a podium. I think it's one of the benefits of having teaching artists that are just that. They're like MacGyvers all over the building. And so the students rebuilt the podium and they presented it to the senior class so that then it could be used for graduation. I think too often what we do is you suspend and you expel and you do all those things. And our school has a really strong culture that's really like loving and sort of oozes everywhere. And everyone who visits, even the hardest of visitors, tends to walk out almost in tears saying, I'm not sure what I'm feeling right now. I'm not even comfortable with this, but I'm feeling something. And I think for us, it's also an intentional process of allowing students to deal with the stress, deal with the hurt and the pain, and creating, we have sacred circles and advisories, we have red tents that we facilitate for young women that are just all women healing spaces. We do those about 3 times a year. And so by the time that students are 11 to 12 graders, they're not only invested in their own success and development, but they also want to make sure that you're keeping up and that you're following along. And that, I'm sorry if I acted out of character, I was just really stressed because these portfolios are so hard. And I'm afraid to leave. And so it's also intentional and collaborative. I think that's the key. If you don't collaborate, it's going to be unsustainable and unsuccessful.
Anybody else want to take that question about, might have otherwise been phrased student discipline, but you took it much more democratically?
Yeah, it's funny, whenever through our interview process, but it goes through many different processes before it gets to me, so it's got a whole set of teacher interactions that happen, but it's inevitable that a teacher will get through the whole process and then finally get to me, and then if one of the first questions they ask is, what's your discipline policy? I'm pretty clear it's probably not a good fit, because the discipline policy for us is really right, so we have conversations about what the expectations are around norms in very much the same way. And so everybody is really tasked for having conversations with our young adults around what the expectations are. And if students move outside of that, then it's really about having longer conversations, because kicking them out of the classroom or kicking them out of the community is in so many ways they've already been kicked out of things before they got to us. So for us, the whole point is to put our arms around them, not do that again.
It's very similar at ICE in that so the founder of ICE and my mentor was as I said before, he was a social worker, but not your typical social worker. And a visit to his office. So I forget him. Talk about me. So a visit to my office is usually not a punitive experience at all. The door is open and it's a small school and it feels small. It doesn't. It's small for a 6 through 12. If it was just a high school, it's 475 kids. But in middle school, it's 200 kids or 210 kids. So that feels very small. I teach all of the incoming sixth graders, so I get to know them as learners. I get to work with them through these group projects, and I work with them resolving conflicts. So we all have relationships, and the relationships are really the linchpin of whatever the response to conflict, right, or whatever it is, discipline, what have you. So there are severe things that, there are extreme cases. There have been fights, and that happens from time to time. There's a kid who's going through a very, very difficult time. His family's having a lot of trouble, and he himself just has personal trouble managing his emotional states. And so in class, in the middle of he's a 12th grader, and he's worried about college and all that stuff that, we're talking about. He and his friends started throwing, little papers at each other, and it escalated very quickly into a fight. And this kid threw a punch and hit his friend. And it's like the first punch that was thrown in the school in a while, a couple of years. And so that kid, I've known that kid. I've talked to that kid very directly, very personally, because I have a relationship with him. And that, should be, or people do, give kids superintendent suspensions for hitting kids in the face. It is there. And I reported the case, and school safety was like, is this kid getting superintendent suspension? And all of that. And no, the kid is not. The kid got an in-house suspension, and meaning that he was in my office or in the assistant principal's office for the past week. We had to talk through what happened, and it really depends on the situation and on the kid. This is a kid who needed to be cowed, right? He's a great kid, but he needed to be made afraid that his position was being threatened, his status as a member of this community where he's been since the 6th grade, and he's been in my inner circle for that entire time. I needed to be mad at him. And the suspension doesn't really send that message. It just sends a message that you're out. So I frankly felt like suspension is meaningless. I need to lose it and go silverback gorilla on this kid, right? So that he can feel I really mean that he can feel ashamed of what he did and really think about it. He needed to feel that. Not every kid needs to feel ashamed, but he needed to feel that to realize he hurt someone that he cares about, and he hurt this place he cares about. So by sitting in my office, I'm reminding him of that, in an ongoing way. And he's gone into the classroom where it happened, and he's talked to the kids there, and I've talked to the kids there, and he's going to come back. And he's also been visibly doing tasks to improve the school during this time. Just being visibly paying back and helping the school out a little bit. So will that turn this kid's life around? I don't know. Will the suspension do anything to the kid? Not really, because at this time, adding that level of stress to his family would just create a cycle and just destroy that family. At least push them farther into a place where they would unravel. So I kept the kid closer, and I made it clear that he fucked up badly, and he needs to work his way back into it. Some other kids would get a gentler treatment, or it would be a quieter treatment. To me, it is the most extreme thing that can happen in the school, is for someone to raise their hands against another person. I'm now backing off. I'm bugging lunch today. We're now hanging out. And he will enter. I let the kids give me permission to send him back to class, and so they want him back to class, so he'll go back.
So let me ask, we're sort of coming to the end of our time here. This has been a wonderful session. I'm trying to imagine how early each one of you were at your schools today to come here and give us this kind of energy at the end of the day, not to mention all of you. So thank you very much. I want to close with a question that is a little bit more personal. Each of you is in a position now where you are in schools in which it's very clear you have some some ownership, some commitment, and I venture to say some real job satisfaction in what you're doing, as tough as the jobs are. If someone came to you and said in the next 5 or 10 years, you could either stay where you are and keep doing this, which is different every day, or do something to make this happen in other schools. But the trade-off is then you become a little bit more part of the system. In other words, you become one of those people that might even go in and have to do a PPO for something, you know? Would you do it? Would you take it?
Depends on who's leading the system.
A lot of people have that answer,
Yeah, I feel like I'm entering my 5th year as principal. I've been where I am for 18 years. I've been in education for 20 years. And so I definitely feel compelled, moved, and called upon to expand the work that I've committed much of my life to, at least my adult professional life. If I can work on dismantling certain parts of the system and having some say, then I may be able to negotiate that. I will say that 2-3 years ago, I ran these leadership intensives for my teachers, parent coordinators, and a couple of folks that I just saw leadership in. I'm both proud and I lose sleep at night because at the end of this year, 5 of those folks will have their school-based leadership license, which means that they can go on to establish, define, and to lead their own schools. And that makes me really proud. And at the same time, in the process of figuring out a strategic plan that's proactive as opposed to being reactive when I have a huge talent train. Because the truth of the matter is that it's in their best interest and in the best interest of the students from New York City to have incredible leaders that will take what they've learned and give it their own vision, their own twist, and their own sazon or flavor, as we say.
I think for me, so this is my 11th year, and one of the things that my colleagues and I have been, I started with, and we've all been doing it around the same time, we realized early on that traditionally the principalship wasn't something that someone would do for 20 years, right? So someone would be in the classroom for a considerable amount of time, and they would be potentially an AP for a considerable amount of time. But really the role of principal is something that people would do for, 5 years, 7 years. I don't know if you're supposed to do this for 15, 20 years. So as I go into my 11th year, I'm kind of at a crossroads because I didn't get into this to be a bureaucrat. I started the school because I wanted to create the school that I would have wanted to go to, because growing up I hated school. And so I see for